Hello, we're going to walk through some planetary strengths, difference between sign strength and house position, and how it relates to your natural abilities and planetary strengths. So this is a quick overview, doesn't cover everything, and to actually look at this you'd need the clock house system and also Huber-specific orbs and a bit of an open mind because it's a bit astrological psychology-y as opposed to just maybe traditional astrology. So here we go. I'm going to walk through the Michel-Gauquelin effect, energy curves, then the inherited sign energy and environmental house energy, and talk a little bit about stress planets and some examples. So the Gauquelin effect, he was a French researcher and died about 91. This was approximately down in the 50s and 60s. 23 years of research. It was the largest body of astrological research. You're probably familiar with it. It was believed to use the Placidus system, and as we know, found some correlations between Saturn, for example, position near the AC around the MC in terms of producing more scientists. And for Mars, we found more correlation for elite athletes before the AC in this so-called stress area or before the MC. And there was a lower number of Mars athletes if they're found before the DC or IC. And as we know, Mars before the AC can stimulate the ego, produce extra adrenaline, etc., etc. So that was Gauquelin, and his research was originally, of course, limited to 600 people. Then they renounced that, and the skeptics got involved, and so they said it was probably a national fluke. So he expanded his studies to include 5 other countries and I think up to 100,000 people. And the data still held, but the skeptics weren't satisfied. Harvard got involved, the university, and said, did their own independent studies on it to try to disprove it, and in the process ended up basically just validating these effects. And so there we have it. The Hubers, through their empirical research, found that the high energy points, the 4 main energy points we're familiar with, AC, IC, DC, MC, noted in the Gauquelin research, follows an actual energy curve through each house. So there's an actual strength in terms of the high and low point as we see this energy curve that waves itself around the birth chart. There's also notice that there was varying strengths by sign position and house position. So when they found that there was an actual high point at the cusp of each house, they actually thought, well, there should be a low point as well too, and it turns out there is. The high point for each house obviously is a point of external abilities and strength to actually utilizing that house's energies and realizing that out in the environment. And obviously the low point is not specifically bad energy, but it's more inward energy that you can't use outward. It's not able to fully express itself out to the environment. We'll get to some examples on this. So in terms of inherited sign energy and house energy, we found that the strongest position in a sign is at approximately 11.5 degrees, and it's strong from about 8 to 18 degrees. It's weak near the cusps, around 0 to 3 degrees and 27 to 30 degrees. So this is the inherited energy. If you think of a Mars with a lot of inherited energy, that means that there's a lot of engine under the bonnet, if you will. The houses represent the environment, what the environment is asking for and willing to receive, etc., etc. So house energy actually deals with what the environment, what we're actually going to be able to produce. So there's 3 different zones, if you can see in the bottom graphic. There's cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Like the 4 main points in a chart that is energy, the point of external focus, as you'll see, is this real strong presence near the cusps of each house. There's a lot of energy. And that might not be, that's something most astrologers are familiar with, of course. And we also have this low point, though, as well, too. And there, of course, if there's a low point, a high point, there should be a balance point. And from there, what we have is the ability to look at the position of a sign, your inherited energy, to push that out, and also for the environment to receive it. So I'll walk through some examples of what some sign strengths can produce alongside some varying house strengths. For that, just mention quickly stress planets. So around those cusp areas in each house, we have this overcompensation effect of stress planets. So it's near the cusps, within a few degrees. I'll mention the houses that they start at a low point previous house. I'll talk about that in a minute. So the houses in stress positions are serving two masters. So if you take Mercury and in the stress position of the fourth house, it's actually serving the fourth house, and it's also basically pressured and dealing with fifth house issues as well too. In this type of dynamic quadrant house system, the fifth house would be starting at the low point of the fourth house, if that makes sense. So any plants that are in this stress zone are hypersensitive. They can pull energy from other plants in the chart and exploit them, and think of like overcompensation, basically the athlete that renounces everything to achieve their goal. And of course, they can be areas of psychological difficulties. So let's walk through an example of a weak by sign, weak by house. If we have a planet that is weak by sign, like we said, at the cusps of signs, it has low inherited energy. And if it's low by house, then it's unable to express the planet's energy to the environment. It would require a long time of personal development to effectively kind of fix that up. Here's an example here. Saturn, obviously at 29 degrees, is considered weak by sign. And it's weak by house because it's near that green little dot there, the low point, the bottom of the energy curve. Here's an example of a weak by sign, strong by house situation. So in this case, you have, I should mention before the picture, sorry. This is the collapse position. So the planet is unable to actually have any engine under the bonnet, if you will, and the environment's not even willing to receive it. So it's a collapse position. In this case, a weak by sign, strong by house, you have a pulling effect by the environment. So if we look at the example here, Mercury and Venus are about 27 degrees in Taurus. So that's making them actually weak by sign, but they're strong by house. They're near the cusp, right at the start of that cardinal zone of that fifth house. So the environment is interested in these archetypal qualities of Mercury, Venus, and they're pulling that out, but the environment is demanding more than the sign can provide. Here's a situation of normal or strong by sign and strong by house. So the sign is providing ample energy, and the environment is willing to receive the energy. So this is called success. Here are some examples, and I took your chart. So if we look at your sun, Sun is in a relatively normal position by sign at about 436, 437. I forget the actual number. However, it's in the stress zone by house. So what we have is normal energy by sign, but it's strong and actually stressed by house. It's well positioned high up in the chart, 10th house sun, obviously. So there's a compensation effect. 10th house aspirations, higher calling, career are met with the needs of 11th house, chosen friends, groups too, etc. So this sun is actually effectively serving two houses, and while it wants to obviously aspire towards its 10th house desires, it also is interested and trying to obviously pull in those 11th house chosen friends and special groups, etc., 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 alongside with it. So this is how we kind of define a stressed situation. It's not a stress in terms of bad, but it's a stress in terms of what the energy is pulling and pushing are able to provide. Last but not least, example of a normal or strong by sign and weak by house. So the sign has lots of inherited energy, but it can't get out. It's like a racehorse stuck in the gates. It's very excited, but it's not able to effectively push this energy to the environment since the house energy is not strong and not interested in it. So I'm going to give another example of Margaret Thatcher. So this is Margaret Thatcher's chart drawn up in Huber style, and we have Saturn over here. That is obviously in the stressed zone. These are called personality planets. Obviously, Saturn, the Sun is in the stress position, and the Moon is in the stress position as well too. So why? She was obviously a very powerful lady. She lost a few times, I forget when, but a lot of defeat. She hit her twins, became a lawyer, and politically just had to really work her way up the ladder. So the question is, how was she able to do that? And if we look through these three personality planets, it offers some clues. For example, her Sun, stressed in the 11th house here, it has ample energy by sign, but it's stressed in the 11th house. So it has its chosen groups of friends where it's up high in the chart, where it's able to think about its life philosophy and what it wants to do. And it needs its friends to formalize itself. However, being stressed in front of the 12th house, it's willing to go it alone and enter into that 12th house isolation. While it needs its friends, it's also willing to pull itself out of its friends. And it's that kind of level of tough willingness that she had, of course. The Moon up here is intercepted, and in the 9th house, it's weak by sign, and it's actually in the mutable stress zone of entering the 10th house. So up here, the Moon, of course, as we know, wants to look good. In the 10th house, it really wants to show that it's capable and that it's being valued. Her press secretary actually had to tell her to open up and be more emotional to the people. But being weak by sign and, of course, intercepted, she just had no ability to get those emotions out. And this is a very stressed position because obviously it's stressed to try to get, while it's forming its life philosophies of the 9th house, it's actually stressed and trying to aspire to its 10th house needs as well. Last but not least, we have Saturn, which is strong by sign, and it's also strong by house. And as we know, Saturn before the AC can represent someone that didn't want to be born. It was a difficult birth, perhaps. And the process of being in the 12th house and then stress and entering the 1st house produces somebody, if they didn't want to be born and they're in this position, can be a very hardened ego. And clearly the Iron Lady was that, and she was probably not admired for her emotional side of things, but her strong will and rock solid iron-clad ego was a defining character of her. So this is just a quick example of how go about sign and house. There's a lot of other little factors as well too, and yeah, that's that. Talk to you soon.